So what happens when you leave a Army credit card at an FBO in a random airport in the backwoods of Oklahoma? Does the FBI come after you? Do you get an Article 15? Do you get a GOMAR relief for cause? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. So there I was, RL2 Captain Rushing, flying high in the right seat of a UH-60 at 2,500 over Oklahoma, inbound for West Woodward, which was one of our fuel stops on our way back from Fort Bliss, Texas, with our destination being Fort Riley. We were coming back from pulling real-world medevac coverage. This was in October of 2022, and I was nearing the end of my progression, but nonetheless, I was still RL2. Sitting in the left seat was my IP, who had roughly 1,500 hours at the time, and since I was doing a cross-country VFR trek with him, he was going to seize every opportunity to test my oral knowledge, and boy did he. So when you leave flight school and you start flying at a normal unit, when you do these very long cross countries and you have several fuel stops to hit, the way that it typically works, of course, there's all kinds of techniques, but the main technique that I've seen in my time is one pilot will fly one leg to one fuel stop while the other pilot manages, and then they will switch duties for the next fuel stop. That way, everybody gets a good iteration of being on the controls and a good iteration of managing. And you keep trading those duties back and forth until you get to your destination. Well, on this leg of the flight that I was onto West Woodward, I was managing this flight. And when I say managing as an RL2 pilot, the IP is doing a lot of assisting just because you're kind of crap on radios. And that's the main thing you're doing when you're managing. Of course, you're doing a lot of other things, but the main thing you're doing is communicating with ATC if you're on flight following, and if you're on an instrument flight plan, you're definitely communicating with ATC. We had been flying a mix of VFR and instruments on this leg, I believe. Again, it was 2 years ago, but I believe we were VFR. But earlier that day, we had been flying a couple of the legs IFR. So my IP was asking me some very basic instrument questions. All right, so he asked me a very basic question, and I had an approach plate pulled up, right? And to the right of my screen, I have TC3-04.5, which is instrument flight for Army aviators. People refer to this as the .5 for short. You'll hear it referred to as just the .5. If somebody says the .5, they're talking about this instrument publication from the Army. Now, I had an approach plate pulled up. We're flying high. I'm managing, and my IP is like, hey sir, he points to it, he's like, what's this part of the approach plate called? And I'm like, what's this part of the approach plate called? And I start like, I'm like, well, your missed approach instructions are right here. You got the name of the approach right here. He's like, no, just this section. What's this section called? And right then and there, I'm like, something's not adding up. Because, the answer's not coming to me. And I'm thinking this, and I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, all right, let's try it this way. Since you don't know, where can I go to look this up? And remember, so I have the .5 pulled up for you guys just for information purposes, but I didn't have it. I just had a random approach plate pulled up. So he's like, where can I go to look that information up at? And I'm like, the far aim. He's like, no. He's like, think of Army publications. Where can I go to look that up at? And I'm like, I don't know. And dude, I felt like crap. I was melting inside. It was one of those moments where I was just like, this is not good. And he's like, you don't know. And I'm like, no, nothing's coming to me. Like, can you help me out? And he's like, you ever heard of the .5? And I was 100% honest in that moment. I was like, the .5? No. What's the .5? And he's just like, we'll talk about it on the ground. And we continued the flight. And like, I'm just, like I said, I'm like melting inside. I'm like, holy crap, like, why don't I know what the .5 is? And I'm vigorously like looking up. I'm like, where's the .5? And I find the .5 in my iPad because, of course, like when you're in flight school, everybody drops you a shit ton of publications. But for some reason, and I had looked in the .5 before this event, but for some reason it was not coming to my mind. It was like one of those stupid moments that you have while you're flying where you can't think of anything. And I was just like, man, like, this is not a good look. Like, this sucks. Like, holy crap, I'm RL2. I'm at a unit. Like, I'm supposed to know what this is. And so, needless to say, that conversation didn't end well. But nonetheless, we still had to complete the flight. So we begin our approach into West Woodward. We pull into parking. We shut the aircraft down because they only did cold refuel, and we go inside the FBO. So we're in the FBO, we're drinking water, stretching our legs, and I go up to the counter, I sign the receipt, I fold up the receipt, I put it in my pocket, and we head back out to the aircraft for the next leg. And my body was physically at West Woodward Municipal, but mentally, my mind was still 2,500 feet in the air, 10 miles back, still thinking about what just transpired with this very basic question that's just ridiculous. And as we get back to the aircraft, I'm frustrated and I'm all up in my feels. And I get in the aircraft and I just pick up my helmet and I'm like, get it on. And then I realize, I'm like, oh, where's my CEP? So I look on the FMS. They're not on the FMS. I check the floorboard. They're not on the floorboard. And I take my helmet off. Check there. They're not in there. They're not around my neck. And I'm like, shit, I don't have my CEPs. Where are they at? I tell my IP, I'm like, hey, we got to find my CEPs. So luckily, we weren't on the APU yet. We walk around the aircraft. And I'm just frustrated. And my IP is just like, here, sir, I found your CEPs. And then I just feel like just an absolute chotch at this point. And we climb in the aircraft. We start the aircraft up, and we take off, and we arrived at Fort Riley. So we land at Fort Riley. We pull into parking. We download our aircraft. And we put everything in the hangar, and then we head over to flight operations. Flight operations, when you get to your unit, it's where you turn all of your C cells, NVGs, your aircraft keys, and your fuel card in after a flight. So we head over to flight operations to turn our C cells, our NVGs in, and our keys. So it gets to the point where we're supposed to turn the fuel card in, and I'm looking through all my pockets. I'm like, that's weird. I don't have the fuel card on me. I asked my IP, I'm like, hey man, did you pick up the fuel card? And he's like, no, I didn't pick up the fuel card. You had it. So I'm like going through my pockets. I'm like, I don't have the fuel card. I go back out to the aircraft. I look all through the aircraft. I don't find it. And I'm like, oh my God, I must have forgot the fuel card at the FBO. And like, I'm already having a bad day. We got busting a simple question. We got looking like an idiot by dropping your CEPs on the ramp at West Woodward. And now I forgot the fuel card at the FBO. Like, this is total meltdown. Like, I'm going to be known as just the village idiot. And I call Wes Woodward up and I'm like, hey, do you guys have our fuel card? And they're like, yeah, we have your fuel card. We can mail it back. It'll be no problem. And thank God, if the FBO workers are watching this video right now, thank you. I know it was 2 years ago, but thank you. They mailed me the fuel card to my home address. So thankfully, that at least happened. But that turned out to be a terrible day. And man, I went home and just thought about that series of events for like the next like 3 or 4 days. That was pretty bad. I mean, obviously we got home safe. That's the main thing. But if anything could have gone wrong outside of anything with, you know, the components of the aircraft, it went wrong. And I did not look good. So if you are having a bad day at flight school, in progression, whatever, watch this video. You're not the only one, and you probably didn't do it as bad as I did it, because this was a pretty terrible day. Well, guys, that about does it for today's video. If you got anything out of this video or you thought it was entertaining, please give it a like. Also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel if you like my content, and we'll be posting another video real soon. And until next time.